Russia is continuing its methodical push to the west. The agglomeration of Pokrovsk, which we've been talking about for a long time here on this channel, is coming more and more into range of Russian troops, as well as artillery and certainly of glide bombs and the like. But as you see, when we start looking at a comprehensive picture, which is one of the things we love to do here at Deep Dive, to put things in context, it's not just on the tactical front, it's also on the diplomatic front and the political front. Things are going bad for Ukraine, almost as bad in every direction. And one of the biggest, probably, I would even go so far as to say the biggest problem is the Western and Ukraine unwillingness to acknowledge reality in nearly any realm you want to look at here. And the result, as we have painfully seen so many times, is getting more and more Ukraine troops killed, more Ukraine territory lost, and cities destroyed. And unfortunately, that's not the limit of the damage, because if it keeps going in the direction it's going, we could see an expansion of the war and a harm even of Western interest as well, because of this unwillingness to just acknowledge what's going on and take actions which could forestall some of the worst outcomes. But let's take a look at this, what we have here. One of the most interesting things here that's probably an indication of why things are going bad on the front line with Pokrovsk is because of the number of Ukrainian troops. They're very limited on what they have. Gary's been showing you lots of videos of the forced mobilizations where they're literally grabbing people off the streets, grabbing them out of grocery stores, out of other stores, just going about doing their business, even sometimes in bars, etc. Well, now they're going to try something a little bit different, and they're going to say, hey, what if we, instead of having this forced deal, let each of the brigades come and do their own kind of recruiting? And so this is in the Washington Post. I think that's even today, where they're saying, hey, here's what they're doing. And this is really weird, because you're talking at nearly the 3-year mark of this war. We're closing in on that. And so they're trying a very interesting tactic. At first, it was patriotism and, stand up and do your duty. But now they're thinking, okay, that's not working. How about let's try sex? That sells really good in the West. Here's one of the commercials. Starts off, kind of going, okay, yeah, the guy's putting together his weapon, and then, wait a minute, what is that? There's all kinds of seductive music going along behind this, and we unfortunately can't put that on there, because then we sometimes get demonetized, so we can't go down that path. But you see this romanticized kind of weird situation. I don't really know why you're having these images of this girl in the Humvee there. But then all of a sudden, the girl starts, instead of just being a sex object, now all of a sudden she's going, hey, maybe I can fight too. So, then all these erotic kinds of imagery and just across the board, it's just something really kind of bizarre. I'm not sure how this is supposed to reverse a lost war by appealing to sex, because listen, folks, I mean, it's not like that there's a bunch of models up in the front that says, hey, you come and join us, and, you can get your fill of this kind of stuff at the front. There's a reason why people have been running away from all of these recruiters that have been trying to force mobilize people, because they know what it means to go to the front. They're not stupid. And in fact, even in that Washington Post report, some of the brigades are talking about they're successfully getting 10 to 15 people a day into recruiting. That seemed like a high number to me. I was actually surprised at that. But folks, their need is about 1,000 per day, just to maintain the status of what they have, just to try and slow down the Russian onslaught, just to kind of meet the needs of the losses, etc. That's not going to do it. I mean, that's not a trickle of what they need. And of course, the issue isn't even as much getting men as it is getting trained men. And, the casualties, there's wildly different versions all over the place. And it's impossible for me to really be able to say with any confidence what the actual number is, only to say that it is extraordinarily high in casualties. I mean, people killed in action, people seriously wounded in action. And what doesn't get much press in the West, because people don't understand the nature of war, the emotional damage, the PTSD kind of situation. You have people who all have been on the front line, some of them for 2 years, and never get to go home for leave. I'm just telling you, that will mess with the mind of even the most stalwart fighter. And of course, all of these drones that come in constantly, the artillery rounds, these glide bombs, all this kind of thing, it just keeps shuttling down the psyche of anyone. So the manpower has always been the most important issue. Russia, to the contrary, has, of course, millions more people available to recruit, and they have been recruiting allegedly between 30 and 40,000 on any given month. But the bigger thing is that because they have those troops, they actually can afford to rotate troops out. They can afford to take a lot of these troops, and they have been training them, by many reports, out of contact, some of which I saw in a report this morning. Some troops haven't even been in contact for a year. Well, that tells you that they have a good control of the front line, and they are figuring out what's the right ratio of troops, et cetera, so that they can train guys who haven't even been into contact yet, meaning that when they decide to hit something big, they have fresh troops to do it, as opposed to the increasingly brittle ones on the other side. But listen, it's a lot worse than that too. I'm going to show you some of the things specifically at the front and what we're talking about there. But let me set the stage kind of at the national level first, because one of the things Russia had been doing throughout most of this, even going back to the spring and all the way through the summer, is they've been methodically whittling down the energy infrastructure with Ukraine. So now then, they've destroyed so much of the energy creating capacity, such that this winter is going to be really, really hard for the Ukraine side. This is something that even came in the Wall Street Journal. I think this is also something from earlier today, that they face a very bleak winter. Now, it's not just that they don't have energy for electricity, which is one of the major issues, and heat, but that means that they don't have the capacity to generate an economic output. They have a very, very difficult time making drones or artillery shells or any of the other tools of war that they have to keep the economy going, because if you don't keep the economy going, you can't even sustain anything. I mean, it is absolutely vital, because you have to simultaneously keep your population fed and warm and clothed, and also produce the weapons and ammunition of war, so that you can keep the front going. All of that has to be done simultaneously, and Russia has been methodically whittling that down. And there actually has been a bit of a lull of late, but I expect that when the winter starts to creep in here, probably at the end of next month or so, I think you're probably going to see a new round to it. So even the rickety system they have can be nearly shut down when winter comes here. That's how vulnerable they are. And the fact that Russia's the amount of these like Kinzhal missiles and stuff has slightly decreased of late tells me that they're probably storing some things up. But as Zelensky recently talked about, there have been no shortage of glide bombs and drone attacks. In fact, Gary, if you can pull that one up there, Zelensky actually said I think on the 13th, so that was just yesterday, he said, listen, Russia has used around 900 guided aerial bombs against Ukraine this week alone. Zelensky said Russia also launched more than 40 missiles and 400 combat drones of various types in 1 week. So that 40 missiles is the one I was talking about. That had been up around 100 or so. So that's slightly down, which tells me that the missiles, those are the ones that have pinpoint accuracy. That tells me that Russia is probably storing those things up, because their industrial capacity continues to build these things up and to build the inventory of them up, so that they can surge them if they need to get into a situation where they want to have a big impact. But those 900 glide bombs and 400 combat drones in a week, that tells you that a lot of these reports that I've been seeing again of late, that Russia's on its last legs, that their industrial capacity is not anywhere near as good as it says. Folks, when you're hitting 900 in a week, that's aerial attacks primarily. That's what those are from. In fact, all the glide bombs, that's what they are from. It's from aerial attacks. You don't hear anything about any more Russian aircraft getting shot down. You don't hear anything about Ukrainian aircraft getting into the air. You literally don't see it. I saw a report last week that said that there are virtually no more aerial attacks by the Ukraine side, even with the F-16s they got, because they just don't have the capacity to get them up in the air and to have them not get shut down. Now, if you have no air, and insufficient air defense, and the other side is able to fly with impunity to the tune of 900 of these glide bombs, which are devastating on the front line, which is in no small part why you're seeing more progress toward Pokrovsk. Then, of course, what is the possibility for success? Where are you going to go from there? And now let's go ahead and get to the front line here. We saw on Military Summary Channel earlier today, talking about one of the key areas, the city of Toretsk. Watch what he said here.
There are very heavy clashes in the Toretsk agglomeration. The final battles, the final clashes. We have video from the Toretsk Vuhilya mine and the Terikon. In this video, we can see how Ukrainians were filming the destructions around this territory. The Russians, there are currently storm process, offensive operation exactly on this industrial complex. And the most important that the Russians, since the beginning of the battle for the Toretsk agglomeration, start publishing the videos of how they were bombing and attacking with the TOS flamethrower systems, the mine of Toretsk and the Terikon of Toretsk itself. So this is already artillery preparation before full-scale offensive in this direction as well. This is the last stronghold on the way to the Konstantinovka. So there are just two strongholds left, this mine and the landfill and this one. And the Russians began clearing this one, the most northern one, which is the final one.
And I want to show you on the map that we use here. This is the Pokrovsk area. This is Pokrovsk here, which we show a lot. The Toretsk is over in this direction here, but you see it's continuing just this larger methodical move all over the battlefront, all the way up to from Kursk in the north. You see it every time I show you this, it shrinks another amount here. And for various reasons, none of which make any kind of either strategic or tactical sense that I can identify, Ukraine keeps sending reinforcements in to hold this open. They keep keeping the lifeline in to keep these troops. They have to be fed. They have to have ammunition resupply. They have to have medical evacuations in and out, etc. And all they're doing is slowly losing. It makes no sense whatsoever. The only thing that makes any kind of sense is that Ukraine should withdraw all of its troops out of here to reestablish their borderline and stop this relentless and unnecessary loss of troops and materiel. There's absolutely nothing to gain. If you claimed you wanted it originally to cause Russia to move troops from elsewhere in the battlefield to put them up here. Well, obviously that didn't happen, but okay, it didn't happen. All right, now then save the rest of your troops for where you're going to need them, but they're not going to. And there was some of these areas over here. You remember I told you that the Ukraine side had tried a month or so ago to have a separate incursion here to try and flank some of the Russian forces that were up here. That didn't work, and now then the attacks have now moved back to the Ukraine side of the border. So this is almost completely eliminated, and you see that the Russians continue to make relentless progress here in the north. And then there's still battles continuing on north of Kharkiv, which all of this just continues to whittle away at the Ukrainian strength down in the Kupiansk area up here in La Toretska, just showed you. And then now in the in the Pokrovsk area, you remember this area that I've showed you several times about how it was shrinking. It used to be all the way back to here. Now that it's almost completely shut off, more Russian progress here. This town of Selidova, which is in the news a lot, Russia is still pushing on the forward side of it, but instead of trying to just take it head on, look like they're continuing to move on the southern flank and on the northern flank to try and cut it off. And once they can cut off the avenues of support on either side of this here, then this will either have to be surrendered or the troops will die in place because they don't have the troops, the ammunition or supply. You just can't keep fighting without that. Down in the Vuhledar area, we've shown you this stuff before, but let me just pull out of that for a second. Where did that go? This is the area where the Vuhledar was, and you can see this is where the battle line was. Remember how this is something that Russia had been trying for a year and 8 months, but once they took that, I mean, now then you see it wasn't just a month or so ago that all the lines were south of this road network here in the northwest to the south, northeast to the southwest, etc. Now that it's beyond that, and they're continuing to move forward, with taking additional fields, etc., moving towards their next targets, which is probably in this direction here. But you see, everywhere you want to look, you see nothing but nonstop physical progress on the battlefield. Now, all the things I've showed you up to this point should lead any rational person to say there is no path to even holding the line anymore. I mean, we're scraping the bottom of the barrel. We're using sex to try to get guys to go to the front where they're dying in large numbers, thinking somehow that's going to work. It's not going to work. You see that everything you've tried so far is absolutely failing at every point. Whether we're talking about, trying this offensive incursion here, trying to hold the line in the north, in the east, nothing is working. So we would think then that the failures on the battlefield should be sufficient to change course of action. But as we're about to see in the diplomatic field, it's also just as bad for both the Ukraine and the Western side. Yesterday, Zelensky made an appeal for more time and more ammunition, seeking an objective that, well, isn't going to succeed. Watch this.
We will continue to present our strategy for forcing Russia into peace to our European partners. And we need to act right now to prevent Russia and its accomplices from adapting to our capabilities. We see an increasing alliance between Russia and regimes like North Korea. This is no longer just about transferring weapons. It is actually about transferring people from North Korea to the occupying military forces. When we talk about giving Ukraine greater long-range capabilities and more decisive supplies for our forces, it's not just a list of military equipment. It's about increasing the pressure on the aggressor pressure that will be stronger than what Russia can handle. And it's about preventing an even larger war. True peace can only be achieved through strength, and the entire next week will be dedicated to working with our partners for the sake of such strength, for the sake of true peace.
Wow, that's hard to listen to. For the sake of true peace, you have to have strength to have genuine peace. No, that day's over. That day is gone. If there was even the fantasy of that, it evaporated at the end of 2022, the last time that Ukraine had a signature success on the battlefield. But even at that time, the fundamentals were unambiguous. They were clear to anyone willing to look at them objectively, that the Russian capacity, the Russian natural resources, the Russian history, the Russian culture, that they were going to recover from that. And oh, by the way, they had nuclear weapons. They were never in danger of actually being driven out, so that Ukraine even had a fantasy of succeeding in getting their territory back to the 1991 borders, which for the longest time was their stated objective. It was never realistic. Those days, though, even to have fantasies, are long gone here. Now, fortunately, not all the Westerners are this way and continuing to support the fiction. So when Zelensky, on his recent tour through Europe, went to a number of places. We've shown you last week when he went and talked with Keir Starmer and several other pieces. Went to Macron in France. But when he went to Italy, he had a little bit different of an outcome than I think he was prepared for. So now watch this, because you're going to see there the Italian prime minister trying to put a good face on this and trying to put good language. Notice Zelensky's facial expressions when she gets to the second part where she's saying, we need a negotiation. Watch this.
As I have said again today to President Zelensky, is to put Ukraine in the best condition possible to set up a negotiating table for peace. A negotiating table, as we have said many times, that doesn't mean surrendering, as too many have suggested in a cowardly fashion. Looking to a future of peace and prosperity, looking to European future also means looking to reconstruction. So I am happy to take this opportunity to announce the date of the next Ukraine Recovery Conference, which will be in Rome on 10th and 11th of July 2025.
A recovery in July of next summer. That's not, we're going to give you a bunch of weapons. We're talking about recovery. You can't recover unless you've ended the fighting, so that you can actually start the process there. And she very clearly, she says, this is not surrender, if some have cowardly said. A lot of people have said that that's exactly what it is on the West, who don't want to give up. But as opposed to Zelensky, who said, he wants peace through strength, she's saying peace through negotiations. And anything that we've given is to help you reach a negotiation. She's not the only one. Chancellor Scholz from Germany is also singing a new tune now. For a while, he was just talking, we're going to give you a bunch of stuff. But now then, he's saying they want a swift peace in Ukraine, and any ammunition and stuff that they have given, and they did give another package of, I think, $400 million or so. It's for the purpose of getting you to hang on so that you can engage in a negotiation. But he doesn't even have the fiction that they're going to try to win this anymore. Viktor Orban, who is currently the rotating president of the European Union, took his opportunity to have that platform to show that he's actually thinking in much more straightforward and a lot less flowery talks, that negotiations, folks, that's the only way. Watch this.
In every war, there needs to be diplomatic work. We need to have communication, direct and indirect contacts. If we don't do that, then we will go even deeper into war, and the situation will be even more desperate. More and more people will die. Hundreds of thousands of people have died. Thousands of people are dying while we're talking here now. And with this strategy, we won't find any solution in the battlefield. So I think we need to stand up for peace. We need to focus on a ceasefire and create a different strategy, because otherwise we will all lose.
Now, you may remember, I think I did a piece last week on part of that exchange where he had with Ursula von der Leyen, who basically called him out in that same venue and said, I think she's actually the one that used that, you're saying peace equals surrender. As a matter of fact, that's exactly right, which is contrasted by what the Italian prime minister said. She says it's not surrender. But Ursula did. And so he was responding to her and saying, hey, those are nice words to use, but they're detached from reality. And you see, obviously, one of the reasons we put him on here is because that's the same view we have. Almost the same things he's talking about is so many people have died in Ukraine pointlessly. They're not dying in defense of their country. That day is past. They're now dying because of the unwillingness of their leaders. And as you're about to see, American leaders' unwillingness to acknowledge basic, painfully evident reality. And now then we're at the situation to where how many more people are we going to allow to die? Now, you just heard both Scholz, Meloni, and Orban all say, you got to talk to people. You have to talk to the Russian side. If you don't talk to the Russian side, then how are you even going to come close to even starting a process of a negotiated end to this? Well, that used to be the very definition of diplomacy. But unfortunately, in America, in this month here of October 2024, seems to have a different definition.
With regard to Minister Lavrov, no, we didn't speak directly, but I was in the room when he made his intervention on behalf of Russia. He was in the room when I made my intervention on behalf of the United States. So I think it's safe to say that we heard each other. I didn't hear anything new, unfortunately, about the ongoing Russian aggression against Ukraine. It's striking that so many countries that are half a world away in the Indo-Pacific care deeply about what's going on in Ukraine. And the reason, again, is because they know that if any country is allowed to act with impunity and to commit acts of aggression, that's a signal to would-be aggressors everywhere that it's open season. And that's going to be bad for everyone. So, again, I listened to him. Can't speak to whether he listened to me, but I didn't hear anything new.
That's diplomatic malpractice. I mean, you're not even talking to the people. Genuinely, you're not. Now, we can hope that maybe behind the scenes somebody's talking, but when he openly almost brags about not talking to Russia, then why is he even in that job? Secretary of State. You're supposed to be the chief diplomat. That's your job title. And you're not even doing it with anybody. It doesn't matter if you're talking to your friends. It only matters if you talk to your adversaries and those you need to negotiate with. Otherwise, the only thing you can have is the force of arms. And we have just shown you graphically, as we have for months, there is no path to a negotiate or to an end via force of arms. The only thing you're going to do is get your side ground into dust. And eventually it's going to be a surrender document that's offered for you to sign to whoever's left, or they will just keep going. Listen, I know that people talk a lot, and I hear many of the people who are, really kind of on the side of diplomacy. They say, well, Russia can only go so far. Maybe the 4 oblasts that they have illegally annexed, etc. That's as far as they'll go. Is it though? Just imagine, I've just showed you the whole front line and where they're continuing to go. Why would they stop if the Ukraine side doesn't give them the terms that they need, which the driving factor for all of this was no NATO in Ukraine? Had there not been NATO in Ukraine, had we just acknowledged that that's not going to happen and said, yeah, that's not even on the table, there probably would have been no war. But instead, we continue on with that fiction. So why then, because you saw in July here in Washington, D.C., we continue to say it's inevitable that Ukraine is going to be in NATO someday. Why would Russia stop if they got to the borders and they took all the Donetsk and all of the Zaporizhia and Kherson and all the other places where they have claims to territory? Why would they stop there if the Ukraine side is still saying we're going to be in NATO? Of course, they're going to keep going because they're going to establish security one way or the other. That's what this is all about. It's about ultimately Russian security. This absurd idea that Russia has some territorial conquest and they want to reestablish the USSR, that once they take care of Ukraine, then they're going to start going further to the west and take NATO countries. That's nonsense. And I heard it again this morning by, I think, a former Polish general. Continuing to say that kind of nonsense is fear-mongering, because people are saying, wow, if they end up winning there, then maybe they are coming for us next. I mean, that's what they want you to believe. And if you only know what you're seeing on Western media, then you're like, wow, well, maybe that is true. Maybe we should be afraid of it. But when you look at what Russia has said, what they can do, and the fact that all of this capability they've been putting together has still not conquered even the rump Ukraine, then by what logic can you say that they're going to be putting a threat to the 32-member alliance? Remember, Ukraine has no fighting alliance. They have a lot of gear and stuff they're getting from the West, obviously, but they don't have any troops fighting for them. So now by what stretch does somebody think that Russia is going to choose to attack into a 32-member alliance that also could mobilize millions of people if they should get into a war? Russia's not going to fight a war unless they have to. Russia's not going to use nuclear weapons unless they have to, unless they're forced into it. Don't put them in a position to where they would have to. And what we can do by that is to have a negotiated settlement. So the Secretary of State, the chief diplomat of America, should do his damn job and have a conversation and start talking about, where do we have common ground here? What can we do to win this? I think I had an image last week of Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister, who reiterated what Putin had said in last June, that all the four, that's the one right there. Thanks, Gary. He said all the 4 oblasts, Donetsk, Kherson, Luhansk, and Zaporizhia, and Crimea, and abandon your quest to become NATO. That's still on the table. If Blinken would just talk to him, there is room for negotiated settlement. Russia doesn't have some intrinsic desire to just keep on going with war. They want to end the war and assure their security and then get back to doing business like they had been doing before, even with Western Europe. They still want to do that. So if we just get this nonsense out of our head that Russia is just on this blind rage to just keep on fighting wars, then we'll start to get closer to reality, because that's not reality. And to continue going down, focusing on this non-reality, more people are going to get killed, and the risk of this war escalating will remain high. So let's get rid of that stuff. Let's start doing something that makes sense. Have our diplomats start doing their job and pay attention to some of these Western leaders who are getting it right now, with Scholz, Meloni, Orban, Fico of Slovakia, Erdogan, even though I'm a critic of his in some areas, certainly on this one, I'm with him. But you're seeing that's like 5 heads of state already. So you're seeing that's expanding the number of people that are saying, hey, just get some negotiations going here. It's time to do that. If you care about Ukraine, if you care about their people, it is time to stop letting Zelensky call these ridiculous shots that he's doing and just saying, hey, That day's over. It's time to negotiate. We're going to close this deal off, get the best deal we can, and just get back to having security for everybody and get the risk of war off the table. That is possible, and that's something we could do if we just have the least amount of wisdom and the least amount of acknowledgement of reality. That's the primary thing what we have for you today. But I do want to talk about one other thing that's been in the news here of late, and that is over the weekend there was some reports that a U.S. Air base, not far from me, actually in Langley Air Force Base, it's like 8 or 10 miles from where I'm at, actually. There were 17 consecutive days where there was military drones that swamped the military base, and as you see there, the Pentagon is stumped. So they didn't know what was going on. Now, this is one thing if it's something in the Middle East where there's all kinds of actors there, and some of these bases that we have, and there's drones flying around. That's something common. But when you see 17 consecutive days around a major U.S. based air base, and we don't know who it is, that should send off some alarm bells. Now, I've heard some people say, well, this is probably just some kids playing or some local actors just kind of seeing what they could do. Once or twice, that's fine. I can see that because some people are willing to take that kind of risk, but not 17 days in a row. Why would you do that? Why would some kid want to just fly a bunch of drones around a military base? And it said a swarm of drones, not just one or two. What I worry about is that, whether this is Russia, China, Iran, I don't know who else, but that they are testing out capabilities to see how our defenses are. And they're sending drones up to see if they're going to be detected and what our objectives or abilities are to defend ourselves. Because in the event of, if we get into any of these wars I keep talking about, all of a sudden they can't take any of these things down, then we are extremely vulnerable. And you see what the drones are doing across both in now the Hamas, the Hezbollah fight against Israel in the southern Lebanon. Definitely, it's a routine factor of the Russia-Ukraine war on both sides of that line. You see that even in recent days, a major Russian base deep in Russia was hit with drones. They were almost certainly guided by the United States, but launched by the Ukrainian side. So even somebody who's in an active war and actively trying to defend themselves is still vulnerable. Now imagine the United States, where we don't hardly have any of these kinds of defenses. We would be very, very vulnerable if someone had the ability to launch drones from within our country. So this needs to be something we put a lot of focus on here. It should not be a minor issue. It should not be a head scratcher of, I'm really stumped here. Figure this out and also learn from the mistakes of Russian side and the vulnerability of the Russian and the Ukraine side, that even when you're trying hard to defend against these things, you got to have a lot more countermeasures than you do. Otherwise, we are making ourselves even more vulnerable and at risk of a nefarious actor in the event that we get sucked into one of these absurd wars. That's what we should be paying attention to. Well, listen, thanks very much for that. We have another show for you later this afternoon at 2:00. We're going to have Rajan Menon, a senior fellow here at Defense Priorities and also an expert in the Middle East, where he's going to be talking a lot about what's going on in the potential war with Iran. And he's going to bring up some very, very interesting things that you're not getting anywhere else. And we need to understand what's really at stake for the United States there. Also, remember, we're now on podcast. Anywhere you get your podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Podcast Addict, type in Daniel Davis Deep Dive, and you will be sent straight to our podcast. Because I know some of you don't have time to watch the video, but you can listen if you're in your car going elsewhere. Thank you very much. We always ask you to like and subscribe this video if you haven't already. Share this with your friends, because folks, we're unintimidated and uncompromised to bring you the truth, no matter what it is, on all these subjects. And we want to share the word with other people. Thanks. We'll see you at 2:00 this afternoon on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.